Previously on my dream bike build, we got the repainted framework reassembled and started to build up something resembling a bike, complete with the engine refitted. And now it's on to the finer details. Right, it's a new day, and it's a new day that's going to be filled with progress, because now that the engine is in, we can work on the frivolities of things like making it work down the line. For now, while Dad is off being a normal human being and having a life, I'm going to work on the bodywork, which for now means rear fairing bits, and these bolts are not wonderful. The trouble is with these bolts is that the threads on the underside go right through to the ground, which means they've spent their entire life exposed to the elements, and that means the threads are not wonderful, if I'm honest. I've cleaned them up with a bit of WD-40, which is a continued theme for this project, is every bolt, if it's even vaguely rusty or dirty, gets WD-40'd, and if it's an electrical contact, if it's a plug for something, it gets some electrical contact cleaner. Because it just means not only will things hopefully work a bit better, but hopefully means things are easier to come apart if ever they have to later down the line. That lines up with those holes. Then what you need to go in there is this bit. Woo! One of me bolts has gone walkabout. Oh, crap. Where the bloody hell is that bolt? Where are you? Here, little bolt. Aha! Yes! We got him, ladies and gents. We've found you sane. That's going to go up in there like some sort of thing that's actually working. Now, there are little pointers you can use to remind yourself exactly what bolt goes where. For instance, by some miracle, I've guessed this bolt correctly. Now, I need his counterpart bolt. It's a bolt which, because it's inside the bike, isn't too weathered. You know, it's not all rusty and stuff, because it's not anywhere near the elements. So what I'm looking for is a bolt of very similar design, but that's probably not all rusty. For example, this one. So, bolts that go in there, let's just WD them. That's looking pretty snazzy. It's all down to the finer details when doing something like this. For example, you might not be able to tell from where you're sitting, or if you weren't paying attention, but I have given these rear mudguard bits a damn good clean. They were incredibly muddy, so give them a clean before they go back on. And it might only last one bike ride, because I've only got to go through one muddy puddle, and that's the end of them ever being that clean again. But not only did it mean that initially the bike looks at its absolute best, but it's easier to clean them when they're off the bike than it is when they're on it. Next up, I think we can start running the wiring loom and getting it back into place. Now, there are simple little things which can help hint at where stuff is supposed to go. For example, this is the fuse box. You might notice it's got these little sort of nodgy bits on it. There is a clip which latches into, there we go, a moulding on there. That immediately is a large chunk of it done, because now that the fuse box is there, it's holding the rest of it in place. This bit, if I remember, goes in there. Actually, there are holes there where it goes through. Okay, that's good. No, that's good, that's good. So next up, I reckon the rear light can actually go in there, because we've got a plug for it. I reckon we'll give her a clean, and by her I mean the rear light, and then we can get it fitted. Prior to the disassembly, the rear light wasn't actually working, and by that I mean the brake light was working, but not the actual, if you turn the side light on the front, it wasn't actually illuminating. Now, I'm hoping it's something as simple as a bad connection, because if it is, I've just solved it with my electrical contact cleaner. But for now, that is in. I've got the rear wheel out. You might be able to see just down here is where a rear wheel should be. And the reason for that is I had to take it out to get these bits of plastic bolted in. They won't go in with the wheel in place, certainly not that I could work out. And while I'm out with the rear wheel, I need to take the shoe carrier, the bit that holds the new brake shoes, and paint that, because at the moment it's silver on a black wheel, it looks horrible. So I'm going to leave the rear wheel out for now, so I'm not going to be able to put the tail tidy on, because when the tail tidy is on, you can't very easily get the rear wheel back on without damaging the tail tidy. Makes sense? Get it? Got it? Good. Right, there is the shoe carrier that goes in the rear wheel and holds the brake shoes, and you might notice, if you look carefully, that it's been completely sanded down and cleaned and masked up. And what could that mean? Joe paints random stuff. Do-do-do. That's right, and on one of many episodes of Joe Paints Random Stuff that you haven't seen, because I've been going on behind the scenes because I don't know how much you want to watch me painting stuff that I've done millions of times already, we're going to be painting the rear shoe carrier for the Kawasaki. And you might notice that apart from most of the ordinary stuff, I've actually masked up bits of it with gaffer tape rather than masking tape. There's nothing trick to this, it's just the fact that we've run out of masking tape because I've been painting so much stuff. Go me! As is the custom, the shoe carrier gets 3 coats of primer, black paint and gloss lacquer before being left to dry overnight. The next day I mount the painted carrier into the rear wheel and refit it into the swinging arm, which by the way is quite a lot easier when the bike's the right way up. How much better does that look when it's black and actually matches the wheel? Ignore the dust, it's been in storage for a long time. But focus on that, it's black and it looks awesome. Next, the tail tidy can be bolted back on now the rear wheel's fitted for good and the indicator wiring routed through and reconnected. Right, that's actually the indicators all wired up, hopefully. Hopefully being the operative word there. Let's get the battery in. Battery is in, tail tidy's on, wiring for the rear lights is done, rear light is on. Yeah, this is very rapidly becoming a thing. To continue the progress of becoming a thing, the rear wheel stabiliser bar gets a respray in gloss black, as is the theme, before I bolt it back on and, naturally, torque it up. Lovely. Before disassembly, the bike sprung a fuel leak, probably thanks to these god-awful wire hose clips. Generally one-time use because it's wire, and when it bends it doesn't work properly ever again, and it's difficult to get on, difficult to get off, and we think was causing some sort of fuel leak. So thanks but no thanks. With the few crappy wire clips swapped out for far better hose clamps, our fuel leak is hopefully cured. It's then time for Dad to work his magic, rerouting the choke and throttle cables from the grips down through the frame and onto the carbs. This has to be done just so, to give a sharp throttle response without the cables getting trapped or snagging on anything when the bike turns. Also, if they're too tight, they might be permanently pulling the carbs open and raising the revs. This takes quite some time to fine tune, so I stuck the GoPro on a time lapse while I flatted down the foot peg brackets ready for their repaint, which you'll see in the next episode. With the brackets sanded smooth and the throttle action looking and feeling good, the airbox goes back on and then it's time for wiring. So that goes on there, and then that's gonna, no, hang on, there's one thing here.
Oh, good, I've just seen what I was looking for.
That's gonna go up through there, isn't it? It won't go in front of the frame.
That nut there is the earth. That's got to go to the battery.
And that's got to go onto this, yeah? There's a switch here with nothing connected to it, so it might well be that. No, there is.
Where does that go?
Right, well this connects up to, where's that plug you just had? We've labelled that as starter.
That's battery, earth. That's earth.
Oh, sorry, it says earth.
Earth terminal, which is there, which will make sense.
After many hours and conversations like this, eventually the wiring's routed through and reconnected. Dad has spent hours on this loom and I think he's pretty much got it, absolutely bossed it. We've got all the loom routed up through the frame, all the earths are on, all the connectors have got electrical contact cleaner on them, so they're not green anymore, they're actually going to work, they're solid. The battery is mounted with the earth connection on it, the fuse box is in place, all the things mounted to the frame to get earths are already on there. We've scraped the paint off on there to get a solid connection. Things like the side stand switch are all connected. Most of the wiring, in fact all the wiring, is pretty much in. So the plan from here is we can check that all the electrics are working, and that is the first major step to getting the thing started again. Click it on. Oh, we've got lights. We've got a headlight.
So we haven't got a tail light. Got main beam and dip beam.
Main and dip. Shall I try indicators?
Yeah, try indicators.
Left indicator.
What have you got on left indicator?
Left indicator.
No rear left indicator. Have you got front?
Front's working fine. Yeah, that works.
So we've got a brake light. Hang on then, 2 seconds. Have we got
on the switch
a rear brake light?
Yes. Yeah. It works, it starts.
We've got oil light, which is good.
Oil
We've got
light.
neutral light. Have we got main beam light?
Yeah, we do. So we found the source of why the rear indicators weren't working. It wasn't something I've done for once. It's this bit of loom that connects to the main actual wiring name for them. And this connector, which should send the signal, is pretty munched. You can probably tell the plastic's all sort of chewed away. So we're going to get rid of this bit of wiring entirely and just hardwire those two wires straight into that bit of the loop. Right, connector chopped out, so we've just done a direct join with some block connectors. Let's give it a go. Ignition, right hand is on, and it's working. Winner, winner, indicated dinner, whatever that means. Right, so what we did was pull apart all the wiring for all the lights that's tucked down here sort of under the clocks area, cleaned all the connections, wiggled all the wires and gave them a stern talking to, and the net result is, if I click it on, stick the side light on, you'll notice the gauges are illuminated, but more importantly, as Dad insulates those wires, the rear side light actually works, and it works sustainably, consistently every single time you turn it on and off. One of the connections, particularly in the wiring, was green, properly like mouldy, probably never ever been cleaned. So contact cleaner has saved the day. With everything working, all the contacts cleaned and wiring insulated, that's another massive step forward for the build. Right, next thing we want to do is get a new sprocket on, because the old chain is definitely getting replaced, and when you change your chain, you change your sprocket. It's just what you do. Now, with this bit of plastic engine cover off, you can see our old sprocket, and the first thing we've got to do is get this retaining ring off. And to do that, just put a bit of screwdriver on it like this, tap it with a hammer, and it's worth bearing in mind we've locked the bike in gear, so this can only turn so much, because that means you're not fighting against it turning the whole time. Right, how big is that likely to be? Because the old Haynes manual, in its infinite wisdom, doesn't tell me the size. It's not 22. 27.
Is it?
Right, now, next question is how the hell am I going to actually do it? No. It's pretty clear we're going to need a 27mm socket for this, but without one in the toolbox and it being a Sunday making a shopping trip impossible, we changed tack and refit the crash bars. The bars mount through the engine bolts, so we loosen the bolts, support the engine on the jack and carefully slide the bolts out. We then slot the bars over the frame and engine bolt holes, attach the brackets and bolt everything back together. It looks so damn good, I'm going to do my best to avoid needing these crash bars. Right, it's the next day. We've got our crash bars on, they're looking lovely. This nut, we are going to even the odds on you today. Using a 27mm socket and an ugga-dugga gun, the nut finally yields and the old sprocket comes off. I clean up the surrounding area, grease the splines on the gearbox, slot the sprocket and plate on, and with a strategically placed screwdriver to stop it turning, whiz it on. And then torque it up, obviously. Being extremely careful of the freshly painted frame, I tap the edges of the protective plate around the sprocket nut, and then it's on to the chain. The chain is joined by a link, which we pry off to allow us to separate it. Then the chain gets fed onto the rear sprocket and pulled through to wrap around the front one. Once it's fed through and the two halves meet, the pin and linking coupling are inserted before the clip is slotted on. The rear wheel does need a lining, but with the repainted gearbox cover bolted up, the chain and sprocket are done. Apart from one thing. Quick bit of housekeeping, this linking clip for the chain, always do it away from the direction of travel, because we initially put it on the wrong way round and then saw that it was on the wrong way round. Because if you put it against the direction of travel, it's less likely to come undone. If you put it with the direction of travel, it's more likely that if it does come undone, it will. So don't do what I did, do it the correct way, like that. Now this is my original Radiator, and all the time I've owned the bike this has actually done a fairly decent job, keeps it cool, doesn't have a heat, can't complain. The thing is, with the rest of the bike that's going to be looking so awesome when it's all put together and painted, I was going to tart this up a little bit. I was going to paint these end tanks and maybe give it a quick clean, but then I saw how actually dirty it was and how kind of bent and knackered a lot of the fins in it were, and some signs of some aluminium corrosion going on. There is definitely some rust showing on the actual frame, and I thought about refurbishing this for all of about 5 seconds before we thought, you know what, yeah, let's just get a new one. I ordered a brand new OEM spec ER5 radiator online, came in a couple of days. It's already black, it's not rusty, it's not knackered, it's not been hanging on the front of a bike for the last 20 years. It's awesome. However, it's not quite ready to go because you can probably tell there is nothing on it. It's just the radiator core. So I've got to transfer a few bits over from the old one here as much as I can possibly salvage. First, I remove the temp sensor and mounting hardware from the old radiator and transfer them all onto the new one. The old fan was slow and squeaking its head off, so I bought a good used replacement one and fitted it with new screws and speed nuts. I did plan to reuse the old guard too, but it was so rusty that it broke off its mountings on the old rad altogether, so I get creative. We are pretty much done with the old radiator. And Marty, you know what that means?
In the bin!
I buy a sheet of stainless steel wire mesh, transfer the measurements of the radiator core onto it, allowing some overhang for mounting, and cut it to size. I then add some thick rubber trim either side of the mesh to prevent it chattering or marking the rad, more neatly cut the mesh to size and mount it to the factory brackets with some screws and speed nuts, completing my homemade radiator guard. And yes, I did swap in black screws later. That brings an end to this episode, with plenty of jobs ticked off the list, including rear end, wiring, throttle cables, new chain and sprocket, crash bars, new radiator and rad guard. Next up though, it's the big one. We finish up the mechanicals ready for a first start, and finally we lay some paint on.